I want you to do something for me right now. It might feel a little silly, but humor me. Unless you are, actively merging onto a busy highway or holding a hot coffee, hold up your hand. Look at it. Open palm.
Okay, I'm playing along. I'm looking at my hand.
Now, clench it into a fist.
Done.
Here is the question. Did a new object, a fist, just pop into existence?
Yeah.
A second ago, there was just a hand. Now, is there a hand plus a fist? Are there two objects there, or did your hand just change its shape?
You are starting us off with a headache today.
But answer it.
Yeah.
Did you create a fist, or did you just rearrange a hand?
Well, I mean, most people would intuitively say I just rearranged my hand. The hand is the object. The fist is just a temporary state. But you're right. If I open my hand again, we say the fist is gone. We talk about it like it died. We say he made a fist, which implies creation.
Exactly. And it feels like a trick, right? It feels like a riddle you'd find inside a Christmas cracker. But what if I told you that this specific question, the hand versus fist problem, is actually the entry point to one of the most vicious, blood-spattered battlegrounds in modern philosophy?
It really is. It sounds harmless, but you've just walked us through the front door of metametaphysics.
Which is the topic of today's deep dive.
Sure.
We're tackling a collection of essays titled Metametaphysics, New Essays on the Foundations of Ontology. And I have to say, that title alone is terrifying.
It is a mouthful.
We kind of know what metaphysics is. It's the study of reality. Do numbers exist? Do souls exist? What is time? But metametaphysics, it sounds like we are overthinking the overthinking.
In a way, we are, but it's a necessary overthinking. Think of it this way. Metaphysics asks, what is the world like? Metametaphysics asks, are these questions even real? When we argue about the fist, are we arguing about the fabric of the universe, or are we just arguing about the definition of the word fist?
That is the mission for today. We're going to find out if philosophers are actually mapping the structure of reality like cartographers of the universe, or if they've just been trapped in a faculty lounge arguing about vocabulary for 2,000 years.
It is the ultimate showdown. On one side, you have the realists, who think they're basically doing science. On the other, the skeptics, who think it's all just wordplay. And then you've got the reformers, who want to burn the whole rule book and start over.
So let's enter the arena. We have to start with the mainstream view, the people who think this is all very, very serious.
Right. In the book, this view is represented by heavy hitters like W.V.O. Quine, Peter Van Inwagen, and Theodore Sider. We call them the realists. And their core belief is pretty simple. Metaphysics is just like physics. We are forming hypotheses about the world, and there's a right answer.
But here's where I get stuck. In physics, I can measure mass, I could drop a ball and time it, I could look through a telescope. When a philosopher asks, does the number 7 exist? Why? How do you measure that? You can't put the number 7 in a test tube.
Well, the realists would say you start by agreeing on what the word exist means. And this is crucial. They believe in something called univocality.
Univocality. Okay, so that means one voice.
Precisely. It's the idea that the word exist means exactly one thing. It doesn't have a special philosophical meaning and then a separate everyday meaning. Peter Van Inwagen is the champion of this. He argues that when we say there are numbers and there are people, we're using there are the quantifier in the exact same sense. So
there's no sliding scale. You can't kind of exist. You aren't semi-real like a ghost in a movie.
No, you either exist or you don't.
It's binary.
Correct. It's an on-off switch. And because it's binary, debates about what exists are factual debates. They aren't just semantic choices or artistic expressions. Either the thing is there or it isn't.
Okay, if they are factual debates, let's look at the facts. Because some of the examples of these essays are, well, they're wild. We have to talk about the teacups and turkeys.
Ah, yes. The problem of composition. This is where the realist commitment to rigorous logic starts to produce some very, very strange results. The question is simple. When do small things combine to make a big thing?
Right. So I have a teacup on my desk. Most people say, look, a teacup. But in this book, you have the nihilists. And to be clear, they aren't the life is meaningless kind of nihilists.
No, they are the objects don't exist kind.
Right.
Mariological nihilism. They would say that if you look at the teacup, strictly speaking, there is no teacup. There are just fundamental particles, simples arranged teacup-wise.
Arranged teacup-wise. I love that phrasing. It sounds like something a lawyer would say to avoid liability. I didn't break the vase, Your Honor. I merely rearranged the particles.
It sounds absurd, but their logic is kind of bulletproof. They believe only the fundamental parts exist. The teacup is just a loose way of talking. It's a hallucination of language. I mean, if you glued two people together, do they become a new organism? No. So why do atoms become a cup just because they are stuck together?
Okay, so that's one extreme. Nothing exists but particles. But then on the other side, you have the universalists. And this is where the turkeys come in.
Universalism says that any two things constitute a new, larger object. So take the teacup on your desk and take a turkey running around on a farm in Idaho. The universalist says there's a physical object that consists of that teacup and that turkey.
A teacup turkey.
A scattered object, yes. They would argue we just don't have a name for it, but it is just as real as a table.
This is where I start to feel like the skeptics are going to win this deep dive. I mean, common sense says tables exist, but teacup turkeys don't. Why do the realists, the supposed scientists of philosophy, insist on these insane extremes? Why can't they just say tables exist or turkeys exist, but the combination doesn't?
Because they are looking for logical consistency. They want a rule for existence that doesn't depend on human whim. If you say tables exist, but teacup turkeys don't, you're just being arbitrary. You're picking things you like or things that are useful to you. The realist says, nature doesn't care what you like. Either everything combines, which is universalism, or nothing combines, which is nihilism. There is no middle ground that isn't just human bias.
It feels like they're painting themselves into a corner. But Theodore Sider, he's one of the key authors here. He thinks he has a way out, right? He thinks he can prove that these definitions aren't just made up.
He does. And this is one of the coolest concepts in the book. It's called reference magnetism.
Reference magnetism. Sounds like a sci-fi technology. Captain, engage the reference magnet.
It's a brilliant metaphor. Imagine the world has a structure. It has joints, like a parkas you're carving. There is a natural grain to reality. Sider argues that some meanings of words, specifically the word exist, are better than others because they lock on to these joints.
Okay, let me try to visualize this. So nature has a grain, like wood, and if we define existence the right way, our language flows with the grain. If we define it the wrong way, we're hacking against it.
Exactly. Sider would say that if we used exist to mean whatever is convenient for us, like tables exist but teacup turkeys don't, we're cutting against the grain. That definition is gerrymandered. It's messy. He argues there is a privileged meaning of existence that actually matches the structure of reality. The joints of the world attract our language like a magnet.
So it's like a magnet pulling the needle of a compass. We might want the needle to point west because that's where we want to go, but the magnetic field of reality pulls it north.
That's a great way to put it. Sider believes there is an objective north to existence. So the debate between the guy who says only particles exist and the guy who says teacup turkeys exist isn't just a matter of preference. They are competing to see whose definition clicks into place with the universe's blueprint. They are looking for the definition that is naturally magnetic.
I can respect that intellectual ambition. I can. It raises the stakes.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, when I hear two grown adults arguing about teacup turkeys, I still get that feeling, that shallowness feeling. Like, are we really doing deep philosophy, or are we just two kids arguing over whether a hot dog is a sandwich?
And that feeling is exactly where the deflationists step in.
The skeptics.
Right. This is the second camp in our roadmap. The deflationists look at these debates and say, you guys are fooling yourselves.
Right.
One of the key voices here is Eli Hirsch. He talks about merely verbal disputes.
And he uses the martini analogy, which I found suspiciously relatable.
It's perfect. Imagine a purist who says a martini is only gin, vermouth, and an olive.
A civilized individual.
Okay, sure. And then imagine a sorority girl, and that's Hirsch's term, not mine, who says anything in a V-shaped glass is a martini. Appletinis, chocolatinis, whatever.
Right. So the purist looks at the appletini and says, that is not a martini. And the sorority girl says, yes, it is.
Now pause. Are they arguing about chemistry?
No. No, they both know it's in the glass. They see the green liquid. They know it's apple liqueur and vodka. They agree on all the facts.
Exactly. They agree on the reality. They just disagree on the label. Hirsch argues that the debate between the nihilist and the universalist is the exact same thing. One guy says the teacup exists. The other says, no, it's just particles. And Hirsch says, you both agree on the particles. You both agree on the arrangement. You're just fighting over the label exist.
That is incredibly deflationary. It takes all the wind out of the sails. It implies that if we just sat down and agreed on a dictionary, the whole problem would just vanish.
That is the core of quantifier variance.
Let's unpack that term because it comes up a lot. Quantifier variance.
It sounds technical, but it's just the Martini principle applied to the word exist. The quantifier is the logical term for there exists. Quantifier variance is the view that there isn't just one magic meaning of exist. There are many possible meanings.
So, in the nihilist language, exist is very strict. It only applies to particles. In the universalist language, exist is loose. It applies to teacup turkeys.
And here is the kicker. Neither language is truer. They are just different ways of describing the same stuff. It's like describing a distance in miles versus kilometers. If I say it's 100 kilometers and you say, no, it's 62 miles, we aren't disagreeing about the length of the road. We are just using different scales.
So the realist is like, I am hunting for the joints of reality. I am finding the magnetic truth. And the deflationist is like, dude, you're just picking a font.
Harsh, but accurate. And Karen Bennett, another philosopher in this collection, takes this even further. She looks at the debate and argues that both sides engage in difference minimization.
Difference minimization. That sounds like what I do when I realize I've been arguing with my spouse about nothing for 20 minutes and I just want to go to bed.
It's remarkably similar. Look at the nihilists. They say tables don't exist. That's a radical claim. But then to function in society, they have to say, okay, well, there are particles arranged table-wise, and for all practical purposes, you can put your coffee on them, and if you kick them, it hurts.
And the universalist says, teacup turkeys exist. But then they admit, okay, but they are scattered and weird, and we don't really interact with them as a single unit, and you can't buy one at Walmart.
Right. They start miles apart, and then they hedge, and they qualify until they are practically saying the same thing. Bennett calls this an epistemic impasse. She suggests that if two theories explain the evidence equally well and minimize their differences so much, maybe we can't know which one is right. Or maybe it just doesn't matter.
So we have the realists hunting for structure, but ending up with teacup turkeys. And we have the deflationists saying it's just wordplay, which feels a bit like giving up. It feels like we're stuck. Is there a third option? Or do we just pack up and go home?
There is a third option. The reformers.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
Change the rules.
The reformers look at the stalemate and say, maybe we're asking the wrong questions. A standout here is Jonathan Schaeffer.
Schaeffer. He's the one who thinks that does it exist? Question is boring, right?
He thinks it's trivial. He wants to rebrand ontology. Instead of asking what exists, he says we should ask what grounds what.
Grounding. This is a big shift. Let's make sure we get this right. How is grounding different from existing?
Think about it. Schaeffer argues that asking, do numbers exist or do tables exist, is easy. Of course they exist. We can count them. We can touch them. Denying them is silly. The real metaphysical work is figuring out the hierarchy, what is fundamental and what is derivative.
So instead of a flat list of things that exist, turkeys, teacups, atoms, it's a ladder.
Exactly. The debate isn't, is the table real? The debate is the table more fundamental than the wood? Or are the atoms more fundamental than the table? It's all about dependencies.
And he advocates for a view called priority monism, which sounds very mystical.
It's actually very elegant. It's the idea that the whole is more fundamental than the parts. He thinks the cosmos, the entire universe as a single unit, is the most fundamental thing.
Whoa. So the universe isn't built out of Lego bricks. The universe is the block, and the Legos are just cuts in the block.
That's the idea. The cosmos grounds the particles. It flips the usual scientific thinking on its head. Usually we think small things build big things. Schaeffer says the big thing determines the small things.
I see why that's a reform. He completely sidesteps the verbal fight about whether the teacup really exists. He just says, look, it exists, but it's not fundamental. What we really care about is the base layer.
And then you have Amy Thomason. She's another reformer, but she goes in a totally different direction. She thinks we can answer these questions using conceptual analysis.
That sounds like homework.
It's actually meant to make things easier. Thomason argues that we make these problems hard by stripping words of their rules. If you ask, does a table exist, but you refuse to use the ordinary definition of a table, you're lost. You're asking a nonsense question.
So she says, just use the rules we already have.
Right. What is the rule for table? It's a flat surface with legs used for holding things. Is there wood arranged that way over there? Yes. Therefore, the table exists. End of debate.
She makes it sound so simple. She's basically saying, stop trying to be profound and just look at the world.
She calls it the easy approach. She thinks philosophers get confused when they try to use words like object or thing without any clear rules, as if they are magic spells. She says, stick to the concepts we have. If the criteria are met, the thing exists.
It's refreshing. But is it too easy? It feels like it ignores the mystery. And there's a warning in the book from Thomas Hofweber about this, right? He worries about philosophers inventing their own secret languages.
Yes, the distinction between egalitarian and esoteric metaphysics.
Egalitarian meaning for everyone.
Yes, egalitarian metaphysics asks questions in plain English. Are there numbers? Hofweber argues we should strive for this, but he warns against esoteric metaphysics, where philosophers redefine words like exist or real to mean something special that only they understand.
That's the dark side he talks about.
It is. If you have to invent a secret meaning for exist just to keep your debate alive, Hofweber says you've probably detached from reality. You're just playing a game within a closed circle.
So we've toured the battlefield. We have the realists, like Sider, who think they're carving the cosmos at its joints, searching for that magnetic truth. We have the deflationists, like Hirsch, who think it's all just a mix-up over vocabulary martinis and appletinis. And we have the reformers, like Schaeffer, who want to change the question to what grounds what.
It's a lot to take in. It leaves your head spinning a bit.
It does. So let's bring this back to Earth. What does this all mean for the person listening to this deep dive? Why should they care if a teacup is a fundamental object or just particles arranged teacup-wise?
I think it matters because it forces us to check our own disagreements in real life. How often do we get into heated arguments, politics, relationships, work, where we think we are disagreeing about facts, but we're actually just using different definitions?
That's the deflationist lesson.
Yeah.
Stop and ask, do we agree on the reality and just disagree on the word?
Exactly. If you're arguing about whether a policy is socialist or whether a movie is art, are you arguing about the thing itself or just the label? Usually it's the label. And realizing that can save you a lot of energy.
But the realist lesson is important too. Because sometimes, we can't just define reality however we want.
Right. There is a world out there. Bridges collapse if you build them wrong, regardless of how you define gravity. Sider's point about carving reality at the joints is a reminder that truth isn't entirely up to us. We have to try to match our map to the territory.
And the reformer lesson.
Prioritize. Don't get stuck asking if something is or isn't. Ask what it depends on. Ask what grounds it. That's a much more useful way to look at problems in business or in life. What is the root cause? What is the fundamental layer?
Here is where it gets really interesting for me. I keep thinking about that final provocative thought from the source material. We assume science tells us what the world is.
Right. We treat science as the ultimate authority.
But science relies on assumptions. It assumes change is possible. It assumes numbers exist, so it can do math. It assumes logic works.
And it never proves those assumptions. It just uses them. It takes them for granted to get the job done.
So maybe the philosopher's job isn't to compete with science. Maybe the job is to dig underneath it, to find that fundamental layer that science stands on but can't see.
The basement of reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are the home inspectors going into the crawl space. Or maybe we're just down there in the dark arguing about whether the basement floor is made of concrete or just simples arranged floor-wise.
I think I'll stick with the concrete.
I think I will too. Thanks for diving deep with us. Keep questioning your definitions, and we'll catch you next time.